Austra. Well, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Estonia this morning. Very
My
excited
pleasure.
to have you. First guest on the Biff Delgado show. And we couldn't have asked for a better one because you have a wealth of knowledge in many different things. But today, what I would like to do is kind of focus more on your fitness and mental toughness and athletic training. Um, all of those things combined can create a very strong and unique individual. And I think that with the time of year that we're in now, where probably people's New Year's resolution, fitness and mental toughness goals might have kind of fallen apart. I think it's a good time to hear from somebody like you. So we'll let you introduce yourself and we'll kind of let you take it from there.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on. My name is Austra. I'm a mindset and resilience coach, mainly focusing on working with athletes, but not really limited to athletes. Anybody really like driven, ambitious, wants to get more out of life. And yeah, it's interesting with the goals, how they work, where I think for the most part, and I have caught myself in this, you're the most excited before you actually get in it. Or even like let's say the first few weeks of you doing it, you still can sustain that motivation. But then you get to the point where it starts to get boring. And for the most part, I think that's where the success comes from, is through being able to consistently sustain that boring, because that's how you really get to high level. It's about doing the same thing over and over again. You do it intentionally, you do it with um being there's a term in psychology, deliberate practice, because one thing is to do it for the sake of just checking it off, but something else is to actually do it with intention, that every time, even like I'm also like playing amateur basketball here. And even like with basketball, you still do the basics, but if you do them intentionally, there's always that small nuance that you can improve. And I think it's something that, speaking on we're now in March, so it's been almost 3 months of the year already gone. And I think there can be two different ways or two different places where listeners might be. One could be that I'm crushing it, I'm right on track, I'm super like in the momentum. Or the other way could be that you're now, which also with that first one, it has to be, we have to be careful not to start slacking off when things are going well. That's where we actually have to sustain it and actually have to focus on, okay, let's keep this going. The other one might be that, and I have seen this a lot, I have experienced this a lot in my life in the past. Well, I already failed. What's the point? Let's wait until the next year, kind of thing. And one thing that I can say on that is at this point, I'm not as big on yearly goals or yearly resolutions. I focus more on seasons. So I'm currently coming to an end of season when I'm focusing more on the business, and I know that I have to start prioritizing more of my fitness goals, because I have some big races coming up that at this point at where I stand, I'm not ready for them. So I need to put energy into them, time into them, and be more disciplined towards the tasks that I need to do for those. And what I do with my goal setting is, so I have this like one main area that I focus on. There's like different life areas or life roles. So I have athlete, even though I'm not like a pro athlete, I'm like athlete, entrepreneur, sister, daughter, friend. And what I do is I usually choose during that season what is the number one and what are the goals that I focus within that. And that will be priority. If I have to choose between fitness and uh, business, I will choose business because that's my focus. But what I do on top of it in the rest of the areas, I put it's kind of like the bare minimum that I need to do not to fall backwards. So I still have level to maintain, but I'm not focused on now growing and accelerating at like everything at once, which is something that I think a lot of times we miss out on. Um, and I usually use the example of cleaning the house. You don't clean the house by, um, you kind of clean it by rooms. I clean this room, then I go to the next room, then I go to the next room, and by the time I get back to room one, there's some cleaning I need to do in that one. And I'm trying to approach my life that way as well. where I focus on one area, then I move into the next one as main priority, then I move into next one, instead of being like, okay, I'm gonna quickly clean something here, then I go there, then I go there, then I go there, and it becomes hectic. And also it's frustrating because you're still moving forward in those areas, but the growth is not as big for you to be like, oh, actually, I feel like I'm moving forward. So that's something that I have seen is that we try to, because in some ways when we reflect on the year at the beginning of the year, there's many things that we see that we didn't like in the year, and it's like, well, this year is the year, so I will change everything. I'll be a completely different person, and I will be training 5 hours a day. I'm gonna read 3 books a day. I'm gonna be working like 22 hours. Then I'm gonna spend time with my family. We have these unrealistic expectations of ourselves, and we can sustain them maybe for like a week, and then we start to fall off. We start to feel like a failure instead of, I call them baby steps. So you identify the area, you break it down to baby steps, which I usually explain them. It's something that you need to do on a daily basis that it's so small that it feels ridiculous not to do it. So if you struggle with exercise and doing 30 minutes might seem too much, let's start with 5. You probably can find time to exercise for 5 minutes. And for the most part, you're probably going to exercise more than 5. You might even get to 30, but the minimum standard, it's 5 minutes. So I think it's valuable to revisit. And when we are revisiting our goals, revisit them with being compassionate towards ourselves instead of now criticizing or beating ourselves up or I should be there. It's like, okay, if you don't like what you see you have or haven't done this far, acknowledge it, feel shitty about it. That's fine. But then take ownership and think about, okay, how can I make sure that next 3 months are better than the last? And then just focus on that instead of now completely signing off and just waving the white flag before you until you get the next start or the next year when you can go ahead and try again.
Sure, absolutely. And I like how you touch on the fact that it's important to be kind to yourself, especially in these new moments of growth, and also not taking it all on at the same time because you nailed it on the head with new goals and new things. And when you start to get into these exercise routines and you start to feel growth and strength, it's easy to become super motivated in the moment, like you said, and your mind and body can kind of take over, and you start to get chaos and crazy of excitement and motivation, and you can crash. And I personally myself, I've also noticed where if you might have set a goal for yourself to, maybe it's a very small one where you say, I'm gonna run a mile, and you work yourself up to that, and you do run that mile finally. And the day after, you tell yourself, well, I accomplished my goal. I'm good now. I can maybe take the next week off. And that turns into 2 weeks, and then you've kind of digressed, and actually it happened to me most when I started running 10Ks and then I did the half marathon. I achieved my goal, and then it was kind of done for a long time. And it set myself up for a little bit of failure. So can you maybe talk through the process a little bit of, I've achieved a relatively small goal, and I I want to take some time off now a little bit, and we're still into the first of the year, maybe pushing past that mental that mental breakdown you might have had in the sense where, okay, now I can push myself just a little bit further because what I've seen with you completed, what is it, an Ironman competition? Was it
Yeah, half Ironman.
yeah, half Ironman? My gosh. Walk somebody that's sitting here in the audience right now who it knows that they're fully capable of doing that, or maybe they're telling themselves they can't do that. Walk them through how you got to the point where you started that, literally that first step all the way through completing a challenge like that, and start by explaining what a half Ironman is, because I think that if they don't know, that's going to impress a lot of people.
Let me Google it. I think I need it in
No, that's okay, because it's running, it's
so
swimming. Yeah.
the 70.3 is the total distance. So it's 1.2 mile swim, 56-mile bike, and then you finish with half marathon,
Yeah,
which
that's
is
incredible.
13.1 miles. And with that, one thing is to finish it. Something else is the conditions under which I finished it, where I signed up with 90 days to go. I have no background in the sport, have never done half Ironman or triathlon, not even talking about it's like kind of more extreme endurance triathlon. have never done have never been on a road bike. I have cycled with like mountain bikes, not road bike. Haven't really done like open water swimming. I knew how to swim. I grew up with like swimming as a kid, but I stopped when I was like 13 years old or something. And with running, I barely finished half marathon in like 3 hours, which is a deadline, which is like for people who don't know, it's really, really slow pace. And there's bigger story behind it as well, because for me, actually, half Ironman felt like something that is impossible, which is partly why the podcast title for my podcast is Chase the Impossible. Because when I was growing up, I always felt like I'm slow, I'm not good at running, and I didn't like the way I looked when I was running. So I literally would avoid. I would wake up at 5 a.m. when I was a kid, like 12 years old, I think is when I started it. I was insecure about my performance at basketball, and 5 a.m. was the only time when there was nobody out. It wasn't 5 a.m. club. It was like, okay, nobody's out. Nobody gonna see me running, how slow I am, how bad I look, all the limiting beliefs that I had that were coming from somewhere. Um, and that's what I did for years. I would wake up at 5 a.m. I would run to, we had like a little park there where there was like a bit of mountain stuff like that. So I would run there. I would do my own. I was making my own workouts. I was doing those. Then I would run back home, get ready for school, go to school. And I did it for years throughout the year, whether it was winter or it didn't matter. Actually, I was doing jump rope so much I broke two jump ropes in half because of how much I was jumping. And and then on top of it, when I was playing basketball for a few months, I did javelin, and I got some kind of like back injury. It just started to hurt out of nowhere, where it was bad. I pretty much like doctors told me they didn't know what exactly was wrong, but they told me, I remember this clearly. They told me you can't be running. So it's kind of like your basketball, everything is done, like you can't run. And I was like, okay, I guess I can't run. And for years I didn't run because I was like, well, doctor told me not to run. And one morning I was late for something, and I remember I had to run to the bus to get it on time to get there on time. And I was like, do I try it? Do I not try it? I shouldn't run. And I did run that small distance. It wasn't much. And I was like, oh, my back is fine. Maybe I can try running. And that's where I started to slowly get into running. But even still, half Ironman, half marathons, nothing was I was like, nice, but I can't do it. I literally was convinced I can't do it. So anybody who, like you said, people that say that they can't do it, I was one of those people. and and even like with that, what happened was there's a few things. When I was living in UK, I was studying sports psychology there. I was in one personal trainer certification group. And there was one guy for him I made him program for Ironman. And I remember thinking, oh, it would be so cool, but I can't do it. I can't run. And duathlon, I was like, nah, it's not the same. And then I think it was 2 years ago. I watched the movie Brittany Runs Marathon, and I was like, well, if she can do it, I might as well. So right after that movie, I went online. I found like Couch's marathon program. I think it was 2 months later that through coincidence, because like my friend, she signed up for relay half marathon with her cousin, and right on that day in my program, I had half marathon, and I was like, no, I don't want to sign up. I don't want to do it. And all this time, I also was out of shape. I wasn't in like peak shape, lean. I was like pretty chubby. So I signed up for it. 2 months later, I think it was that I finished it. And I think it was 2 months of actual training. It might have been 3 months, but the actual training that I did, it was like around 2 months. And I finished second to last, which before would have been kind of like a trigger for me. But this time I was like, where I was joking with there was like another person from I think Germany where we were both at the end, and I was joking with him. I'm like, we're like royalties. The whole city is shut down just for us, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which again shows like the difference you can have in perspective. Because I could have focused on the fact that I'm slow, I'm this, I'm that. Instead, I'm like, look, this is so cool. Like we can enjoy this. And I had said to my friend before that if I finish this race, now half Ironman becomes a possibility. Because up to that point, I couldn't do it because I can't run the distance. That was the only reason. And I have like the whole story of how I got to Ironman and everything. And like I have 3 episodes just on that alone. But I gave myself, I like once I finished it was my third half marathon at that time. Once I finished that, I was like, I don't think I want to wait another year because there was one here in Estonia, a half Ironman. I signed up for it with 90 days to go. Usually, it takes 6 to 8 months to prepare. So I was trying to cut off at least half the time of preparation with having no background in the sport and not even being in like really good shape with like the running. And I think that's where I think we assume, and even like with the training, people think that I like to run. I don't. Actually, I don't like, I hate it. I usually say I dislike it with passion. And and with that, the reason why I do it is one, and it's partly that idea behind the chase the impossible is we have all these things that we think we can't do. And what we do is we just accept them. Okay, I can't do that. I can't do this. Instead of being like, okay, have I actually tried? Did I actually give it a go? Or did I just uh, just thought that I can't do it and I just agreed with it and I didn't even give it a go. Or I just tried once without giving like 100% effort. And and then once you identify that thing, then what you do is you kind of approach it with curiosity. I wonder if I can do it. Like with the half Ironman, I didn't know if I can do it. I have never done it. I have only 90 days. I have no background, no experience, no nothing. Technically, and I had some people in my life that they didn't say it, but I could see that they didn't believe I can do it. Um, which is another point that you don't need to believe you can do it to do it. Or at the very least, go through the process, prepare yourself as much as you can so that on the race day, which was interesting that I actually wasn't stressed, I wasn't worried. I was more like, well, I'm gonna find out today if I can do it or if I can't. Can I
Yeah.
finish it in like less than 8 hours or not? We shall see today in this race. And that's where that pushing yourself forward with what you said about the it all starts with small goals. Like in this whole story, it started with me starting like I think the first workout with that like marathon program was you have 3 rounds of you run 1 minute and you walk 4 minutes. I was overachiever. I did 4 rounds, but I was total running in that workout for 4 minutes. And then like I think it was less than 2 years, maybe 1.5 years later, I finished half Ironman. So that's where I think a lot of times we think that, oh, those small steps, they're so small they don't really matter. But what they do is they start to build up momentum. You start to build up tolerance of being able to tolerate more, do bigger. And also you build your self-belief because by doing you start to build confidence and then you start to believe that, oh, maybe I can do more. And then you do a bit more and then you kind of build it up. But the challenge with, and I can really relate to what you said about the races because after the first half marathon, I was like, well, maybe I don't go for like anything else. Like, this was fine, good enough. Let's just stop. But there was something in me that was like, no, 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 this is not the finish. Like you have more in you and you're not done yet. There's still more things for you to not even accomplish, but everything that I do with the physical feats is I'm also like during the winter, I do cold swims outdoors in snow. There was one year that I did 90 days every single day, go out in snow. The coldest one was minus 16 degrees Celsius. So it was cold.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is it's doing things that, or even like when it comes to resilience or mental toughness, it's the same as patience. If you want to build patience, you have to do something that requires patience. That's how you build a skill. It's the same with resilience. If you want to be resilient, you have to do things that require resilience, which a lot of times is something we don't want to do. And that's where what I do with all these things that I am doing is I'm trying to understand myself deeper. I'm trying to learn new ways to master myself, understand how I can handle like high pressure situations. And in some ways, I do it with intention to prepare myself for life because it's easy when things are going easy. But then always something always happens. There's always some kind of challenges. So I want to make sure that by doing uncomfortable things intentionally, I prepare myself for situations where to make sure that at the very least, I don't crumble in those situations. And at the very best, I can handle them. And I think with what you said about that fall off or having to take some time off, it's there was like a challenge I did a few years ago where I think there was somebody or some many people have asked me like, how do you not lose focus kind of thing, which is really relevant to goals. Um, it's kind of like surprise, surprise, like you will lose focus. You will. Like it's part of being human. But what matters is how quickly you get back on track. So that's where now, let's say, I'm not immune of not or of like falling off the track. I fall off the track all the time. It's part of being human. But what I do focus on, actually, I have a good example. Do you know what 75 hard is?
Yes, I do. Yep, I'm
Okay,
familiar with the program. Yep.
good. So this is my fourth time doing it, I think. And I think it was Sunday. Sunday, I actually failed because I miscalculated my water and I was already day 20 something. And I realized that, of course, the next day when it's too late, you have to start day one.
Hmm.
For me, failure would be to now say myself, you know what? It's been almost a month. I've been doing 2 workouts a day. It's been intense. Let's take a few days off and let's start back up then. For me,
Yeah,
that would have been a failure. Um, in this case, I'm like, which actually it happened last year as well. It's so annoying. I failed on day 20 something right after half marathon. So I finished half marathon. I still did my second workout on top of it. And then I realized I think my second workout was a bike ride. And I did it with my dad. And once we got back, the next day I realized because I gave him my watch and we were checking all the stats and everything. I realized we actually did the workout for 40 minutes instead of 45. And I was so caught up in conversation we had about all the statistics and everything that I forgot to do extra 5 minutes. And I realized the next day, and I'm like, okay, I need to start day one. And I shared it on my Instagram. And one person said, which I think is why it's important to share our losses and failures as well. She said, thank you for sharing it and showing that it's okay to start over
sure.
because it is. And it's not a failure. It is, I don't want to position it that way. It is a failure. I did fail. But for me, what matters is how quickly can I get back on track? Did I allow it to actually get me off track where now I start cruising and I'm like, well, I gonna take a few days off or whatever might be the case. And in this situation, it was the same. I was in basketball tournament last weekend where we had like Saturday, we had 3 games. I had to do outdoor workout on top of it. Um, and then on Sunday, we got home late. I think we got back at 10 p.m. and I still had my second workout to do because the game that we did, it wasn't 45 minutes. And I was like, okay, I need to do my second workout. And I did it at like 10 p.m. I read my pages, did everything, and then only the next day I realized, oh, I think I miscalculated my water. And I wasn't for sure. So I was like, okay, that's a fail. And I think that's where we can measure our character and our growth is how do you deal with the hard situations? How do you deal with situations where you fall off track compared to how you dealt with them before? Because
Sure.
before, first of all, I wouldn't even share online that I'm doing it because if I failed, everybody gonna see and they're gonna judge me
Yeah,
kind of thing. And then if I did fail, and if I was sharing and I did fail, I would just disappear. Gone. I wouldn't say that I failed. I would just be like, I just stopped posting about it. But now I'm like, I'm taking accountability and I'm like, okay, I failed. Today is day one. I'm starting over. And then also, if anybody want to join, feel free to join. Day one, So it's something to keep in mind that we will have those moments when we take a step back, and it's fine. Also, with let's say if you finish half marathon, that's a big accomplishment. You might as well, because a lot of times we don't do this, take a step back and actually enjoy it and be like, wow, I accomplished this, which I don't think I did with half Ironman as much. It still hasn't registered that I have finished it because it was so impossible for so long.
Sure.
And and I think that's where it is important to also take a step back and enjoy it, because sometimes we can get too much into that go, 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 that we actually don't stop and look back and be like, wow, I have gone so far. Pat yourself on the back, and then you can move forward. So it's kind of like how you navigate it and what's the energy behind it with taking that step back. And giving yourself space to do that, because I know that now I haven't really had any weekend that is free for almost 2 months, I think. So I'm like, okay, this weekend I need to make sure that I have at least one day or one part of the day, knowing how my schedule is. Probably it'll be one part of the day where I just do whatever I want. I and I'm sometimes I even put it in my calendar, do what you want, and I block it out and I give myself that space, because otherwise you can be going so much after your goals that you burn out, and then you have this time of recharging before you can get back to like going at full speed.
Sure. In regards to the 75-day hard challenge, I'll post links, things like that for people to follow, and we can, that's for a separate conversation. But I do like that you touched on that, and I do like that you brought up your failures with that, because one of the best things you can get out of that challenge is the integrity aspect of it with yourself, because nobody is holding you accountable. There's no checking in, there's no reporting into, some senior leader or something like that. It's truly to yourself, and you can bullshit through that a little bit if you wanted to, like with the social media aspect. If you missed a day, nobody's gonna know. You can still lie to yourself and say you did and keep trucking through. But I've completed the challenge one time, and I failed probably 50 times. Um, but when you do finally complete it the one time with full integrity, it truly is life changing. And it doesn't have anything to do with the physical portion of it necessarily. It's got everything to do with your newfound accountability and integrity to yourself. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And it ties in perfectly with what you were saying before. Um, it's it seems like to me with people um, it- getting into exercise, if you will, they get so focused on the fact that they can't do it. And I love how you touched on how they looked while doing it too. You touched on earlier in the conversation how that was something that you thought about. And my gosh, when you see somebody out running, in the street or, down a trail or something like that, it's important to understand you never know what mile that person might be on. They could be on their very first run and they're within their first 10 feet, or they could be on their 120th mile, and that might be why they look the way that they do. So it's important to not judge. And I know that other runners, I know that truly can say that other runners, when they see someone running, are not judging them because they know what it's like to be on whatever mile they're on.
And
So
I
I'm
don't
glad.
even think that people were judging me. I just thought they are.
Yes, yeah, yep. You were creating a false impression of yourself, and once you overcame that, um, then really the sky was the limit. You really started to surprise yourself in a lot of things. So, um, with our time kind of winding down here, go ahead and give the listeners a very brief description of your podcast so that I'll attach a link to it too, so that if they're listening today and they want to kind of go and really get more involved in what you specifically have to offer, because you do offer programs that people can sign up for and those sort of things. Please take a few minutes to talk about those programs, how they can get started, and then I will post the links on my socials to share that with people so that they can actually go from this show to actually applying themselves in your direction where you can truly help them out. So please go ahead and explain that.
So podcast is called Chase the Impossible. Majority of it is interviews with people that, well, topics that I'm interested in, different people, different experts. It might be athletes. It might be, I recently had sleep expert on. I will have communication expert on. We have talked about healing. So different kind of topics that can help to one, understand yourself better, master yourself, but also become your best self. And that's where like I don't want to limit it to just one area because I believe that for you to be the best self, you need to really touch on all areas of your life, not just one. Um, and it's available on all major platforms. If you look for my name or if you look for Chase the Impossible, you should be able to find it. But it's the chase, not chasing, because I think there's like some more podcasts that have chasing.
Okay.
Um, with the coaching right now, I mainly focus on working with athletes. I mainly do one-on-one, but I am currently exploring the thought of doing group coaching as well, where we could do like on a weekly basis, different Q&As, or I deliver different lessons. So I do have the wait list for that on my website. So anybody who might be interested can join that. And then also I will see if there is interest, and then I can create it. Because for me, anything I do, it's like if there's a need for it, if I hear from people that want me to do something, I'm more than happy to do that and to add value and to share my lessons, my knowledge. And it's partly why I do the podcast. I want to get the best information out of the best people at their field, and then make it as practical as possible so that people that are listening, they can actually go and apply it in their lives instead of just consuming and being like nice motivational, but it's like what can we do?
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, with you being my first guest on my podcast, and this is my first time speaking to somebody in a podcast platform, I'm pretty nervous coming on, and you've done a phenomenal job of filling I couldn't have asked for a better guest,
Yes.
and I think that with podcasting, there's so much out there, and there's so much noise, and I mean, there's a podcast for everything, and I think everybody's kind of striving to be the best and they all want to be, and that's why they do it. And with you having one that's focused on getting people to their prime shape, getting better, finding self-improvement, those sort of things, that's the direction we're also trying to head here. I like to feature small businesses and platforms and just try to find a way to elevate and boost people. Um, and so I feel like it's appropriate to have people on that are talking about other people and making other people better than rather than me sitting here just talking about how I feel about, whatever. So if you are in a position now, if you're listening now and you can hear us talk and you're in a position where you're thinking about doing something or thinking about trying something challenging, taking action in that first step is just so important and so valuable. And I'm glad that you touched on the fact to be kind to yourself and set realistic expectations because there are people out there with the school of thought of no, setting a realistic expectation is an immediate failure. You got to push yourself, push yourself, push yourself. That's fine for them to feel that way. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're just getting started on these things, it is baby steps, it is failures, and it's a lot of integrity with yourself. And if you can complete all of those things, I feel like you're going to be extremely successful
Yes,
in
agree.
the long run. So I guess I have to ask you. So you're in Estonia,
Mhm.
and how often do you come to the United States, or have you been to the United States, or
I haven't been, but I have in mind that I could travel there this year. It is something that is on the definitely in near future. I definitely am going there. I have many connections there, many people that I'm working with there. So it's definitely on my list, and at the very least, the next 12 months for sure.
what are Estonians' thoughts on people from the United States? Do they think about the United States ever? Is it somewhere they all want to go? Has the recent political landscape change been something people talk about? What are
Uh,
people's thoughts on it?
I don't think I'm the best person to answer that because I think with the way I am, well. I don't like to speak for nation. And this is,
Sure.
I'm originally from Latvia. So this is even like, I'm kind of like a guest here. But I think I do think that people pay attention to that. In some ways, it's hard not to. Um,
Of course.
but people thought of Americans, again, with this answer, I have to be mindful of the fact that a lot of times what you see online, that's where you see it's kind of like you see the not the negatives, but it's kind of like what takes off in general on social media. And this is something that I'm working really hard with the podcasting work that we're doing, is a lot of times the loudest voices get the most attention.
Sure.
And the loudest voice is not always the most reasonable or the most um educated. So I think that's where with stuff that we might see online, even like from the States, and it's not just the States, any country really, a lot of times you see the loudest voices the
Sure.
most. And I think that's where it's hard to make clear judgment of, let's say, like with the question about Americans, it's hard to make clear judgment because a lot of times what we see is just like some clickbait videos that are
Yeah.
created just to get attention or to, those are usually the ones that like blow up. So for me, it's so hard to say because I see one thing online, but then with my connections, it's completely different engagement, completely different experience. And I can say that I do like the sense of drive, ambition, and wanting more. But then also, I think with that, the challenge is when do you have enough? And nothing is, I never like to say people like when is enough enough because people keep asking me that. It's like, well, I don't think you ever have enough, but it's also like what is that enough? The kind of like the where is it coming from? Whether it's coming from I am not enough, so I need to get more, or is it coming more from I wonder how much I can accomplish, how much can I help, how much can I contribute towards making this world a better place and helping people out, So it also
Sure.
depends on the energy behind it. But I do admire the drive, that kind of like ambition and in some ways relentlessness about it. And from what I have heard, and my brother has gone through the whole country on a trip, it's really beautiful. The
Yeah,
nature and
the United States from coast to coast, it's truly a unique place if you can ever get a chance to travel it. And I by all means I know I kind of threw you on the spot with like a big, question that could go many directions,
but that's an
but
interesting question
it's
because it's really something that I have noticed that when you speak like a lot of my clients they are from states and it's kind of like it feels like it's different from what you see
sure.
online or what's kind of like majority of the content that you might see and also depends on like who's creating that content, so that's kind of
Absolutely.
the world we live
Yeah,
in.
I would say that, and there's the legacy media aspect of things, which is what you're speaking of, and then there's you have your extreme left, you have your extreme right, and they kind of like you had said before have their loud voices on either end, and I feel like the United States is like most of the rest of the world, where most of the people are pretty much just want to live a happy life. They get along with their neighbors and those sort of things. I also ask that because it's not very often that, you ask somebody where they're from and they can say Estonia. I mean, many people you could ask them to point that out on the map, and I don't know if they would be able to. And so that's really unique in itself too. So that's why I wanted to ask and maybe get your perspective on that sort of thing from where you're at in the world. So, but no, I do appreciate you being on my show today. What I would like to do is, let's see, today's March, it's March 14th here. And I would like to maybe set some personal goals for myself or exercise goals and then hold myself accountable and meet up with you again, in like, let's just say 80 days.
Okay.
Let's see if I can take on a 75-day hard challenge or something and we'll see.
Oh, there's no
Yeah,
ifs. There's no ifs.
yeah.
When are you starting? What day?
Well, um I don't know. I before I commit to starting a 75-day hard challenge, I want to make sure I'm ready for that because I know what it all entails and I don't like to fail at those sort of things, even though I have failed multiple times at it. I really want to try to give it a solid go. So let's do this. Let's schedule a visit like 6 months out. All
Okay.
right. I know that's a long time, but we all know how life is. It goes by super fast. So we'll just set up a 6 month checkup. That allows me to fail and begin maybe 2 times. I think I have 2 sets of failure in a
I
six
think
month.
that's the challenge is that you're already planning the failure. And with that, it's kind of sure, nice, but you deal with the failure once it happens. Now you're planning as if you know you're gonna fail. It's like, okay, I'm gonna fail, so 6 months instead of let's say three. And it's already like you're mapping it out based on like, I know I'm gonna fail, I know I don't have it. And and I do, it's something that I tell a lot is commit before you're ready. And it's like um, actually, I can go one step further. If you start day one today, I'm gonna start with you. Day one today. Like you don't need to be ready. You don't need to prepare for it. You know what it takes. You know you did it once, so you can figure it out again. And and it's also like that's where you actually grow. Because now instead of giving yourself 6 months, it's like, okay, 2.5 months, I'm done. If I fail along the way, which can happen, again, we're humans, but if I fail along the way, I'm gonna deal with it then instead of now mapping out the whole time with like expecting yourself to fail.
Sure. And you that right there in itself was an unintentional coaching moment, which is awesome. Like I hope the viewers and or listeners caught that because you nailed it right on the head with that, I immediately set myself up for failure by planning a fail. So,
Yeah.
you got to attack these things like I'm doing it no matter what, and then
And many
that's
times we don't see it. I do the same thing, and that's why it's valuable to have people in your life that can call you out. Like I remember there was this situation where I was like, oh, like I was telling to one of my like friends who is more like a mentor to me. I was like, oh, like I had these next 3 months of me training, they're gonna be so hard. And he was like, why are you thinking about next 3 months? Think about today. That's what you need to do, is what you need to do today. And then the next day, you focus on what you need to do today and do that. And then you wake up one day and it's 75 days have gone by or 3 months have gone by and you're now are at the finish line. And it's so easy to now we look at this big mountain in front of us and we're like, I don't think I got it. Instead of like, okay, what's the thing I need to do to get there? I take this step and then I focus on the next step. Then I focus on the next step. If you fail along the way, okay, we deal with it then. But it's not something that like I'm still learning to do that myself, is not planning for the failures to happen. Once they happen, you deal with them. But if you plan for them, you literally just now compressed 2.5 months. Instead of focusing on those months, you're like, well, 6 months. Let's check in 6 months. That's a safe bet. Let's play it safe.
yeah. Right. And then a guy like me is what's going to happen is I'm going to start doing the math where okay, I am now 75 days away from the end of this 6 months, and that's where I'm going to put myself in that position where I'm trying to do 75-day hard, trying to do the podcast, trying to work, trying to be a husband and father, trying to do all these things at once, and I've set myself up for complete failure all
Yeah.
around. So very, 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 very good. Excellent information out of you today. I am going to post a link to your podcast. Any links that you send over to me after the show, I'll post on there that you might be able to help the viewers. And we'll set a date for, and if as
Here's what we
long as you
can
have,
do. You said that it's coming out on the weekend, right? So what if we start 75 hard, we start it on Monday,
okay.
and anybody who's listening who might want to join, they can join in as well.
Hey, and it'd be a great day to start because Monday is St. Patrick's Day. We do know that a big challenge of the 75 hard is no alcohol consumption. So get your St. Patty's Day partying over with over the weekend because that's when all of the parties are anyway. And then wake up Monday morning thinking about St. Patrick. and the 75-day hard, and let's just attack it.
Yeah.
So let's do it. Well, thank you so much. You were a great guest, and I'm looking forward to tracking. And anybody else who's going to join in with us, just know that whether it's for Estonia or good old Nebraska, we're thinking about you when you're out on those streets, whether it's hot, cold, rainy, sleet, hail, whatever it is, we're there with you. We're thinking about you and we care about you. And hopefully you care about yourself. So, again, thank you so much for being here today. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you very shortly.
Thank you.